You're listening to She's Got Drive podcast, the podcast that inspires women to be the driver in their own life through the life and stories of Black women with drive. And I'm your host, Shirley McAlpine. I'm a business consultant, an executive coach, and a leadership facilitator, working with people and organizations to live their lives by design and not default. Welcome back to another episode of She's Got Drive. And in this episode, we have a really lovely woman who's a friend of mine called Cecilia Nelson-Hurt. And she's going to be my guest in this episode. And in fact, the interview had two distinct parts. So I'm now putting in part one and part two. So we're going to have part one this week and part one the following week. So you can get 2 weeks worth of Cecilia, and you'll understand why that is going to be such a wonderful experience for you. So I'm really excited that she's on the show. But before we go any further, I do want to do another quote from Toni Morrison, who passed away on the 5th of August, and who has given so much to all of us. And my last in my What's Been Driving Me this week, you can see that I shared a quote there, and this one is something that she said in an interview. It's something that she talks to her students about, and what she said was, when you get these jobs that you have been so brilliantly trained for, just remember that your real job is that if you are free, you need to be free. You need to free somebody else. If you have some power, then your job is to empower somebody else. This is not just a grab bag candy game. And we talk about that a lot on She's Got Drive. We talk about empowering others. We talk about supporting others. We talk about opening doors. We talk about sponsorship. And when you've got a seat at the table, inviting others to be at the table as well. And so, you know, I wanted to share that quote. Of all the many quotes that are floating around Toni Morrison, it's one of the ones that stood out for me. So we miss her, but we hold her in our hearts with her through her work, and I just wanted to honor her today. If you are enjoying the show and enjoying She's Got Drive, can I ask you to rate and review the show? You know, it's so important that the ratings and the reviews really help in driving and increasing the downloads, increasing more people finding out about She's Got Drive, and more women being inspired by the stories of other women, the tools that I'm sharing on She's Got Drive as well. So please head over to iTunes or wherever you're listening to She's Got Drive and rate and review the show. It really, really, really makes a difference. The other thing that I want to remind you of is, you know, last time I was talking about the August as a bridge and what's been driving me this week and the various things that I'm doing. And I remembered then, of course, that I've got the 4-step goalkeeper. The 4-step goalkeeper, she is something that you can use all the time. So, you know, the link is in the show notes. You know, download it, think about what you want to accomplish for the rest of the year, and then, you know, use it as a reflective tool as well as a planning tool. So there's the 4-step goalkeeper. So it's shirleymcalpine.com/goalkeeper. And you can find it there for download. Now, let's come back to Cecilia. Now, Cecilia, as I said, this is 2-part. The first part is she shares more about her relationship with her husband. And, you know, the one thing I love about when I do these interviews, you never kind of, you know, I have these questions and you kind of never know where it's going to kind of pan out into. And the power of our partnerships in our life, in us being, and its connection to us being satisfied in life, of course, and our professional success can't be underestimated. You know, that so many times I speak to so many women and Black women who are really, really successful professionally and have not been as successful in their personal life finding their partner. And so when that emerges as a conversation, I always think it's really powerful to hear someone's story of discovering their life partner, how they how they work things out together, and what does it look like, and what does it feel like, and what's been their own lessons as they've traveled that way. So so that's the first part, is a lot around that. And then the second part, you'll hear what Cecilia does, and the second part is really focused around her work and the work that she does at L'Oreal, but also the work that she's doing in the world, in the fiber community, and how, when you're being called to something, how do you respond? When your passion and your heart space is calling you to be a contribution to a particular space, how do you respond? And then how do you navigate that? And we start to talk about, how do we pay attention enough to look after ourselves as we do that kind of work in the world too. So that's the two parts. So I wanted to split it up, because otherwise it would just be too long an episode, and there were two distinct things. So I hope you enjoy both of them. And let me tell you a little bit about Cecilia before I go over to the interview. So Cecilia is the AVP of Diversity and Inclusion for L'Oreal USA. And that means she's responsible for shaping the diversity effort through the innovative initiatives that underscore the company's commitment and its mission to build the standard in making beauty inclusive. She works with leadership across divisions and departments at the company to educate and promote diversity processes and procedures to positively impact the effectiveness of the organization and how the employees are engaged. It includes work with the New York Coalition of 100 Black Women's Role Model Week and the New York Urban League's Empowerment Days for Young Men and Women. Those are the kinds of activities that she does. It's quite wide ranging. But before she was at L'Oreal, Cecilia was a vice president at University Relations for JPMorgan Chase, where she was responsible for managing the campus recruitment and diversity relationships, as well as financial endowments across the historical Black colleges and universities. She's on the advisory board of the Black Women of Influence. She is herself a trailblazer. She lives in Queens. She's wonderful. I've known her for a while now. You're going to love her. And I'm going to hand you over to Cecilia Nelson Hurd. Cecilia, thank you so much for being a guest on She's Got Drive.
Thank you for having me. This is an overdue time for us to talk, right?
It is, yeah, it is. I've always, since I met you 2.5 years ago, something like that, kind of always wanted you on the show. And and I think I want to say, you're going to share with us what you do, and I want to say why I wanted you on the show. Should I start there? I mean, apart from the fact that you're just a wonderful woman, right? And in terms of, and you're a leader at L'Oreal in terms of D&I and what you're causing in the organization. You're a connector. You're a supporter of women. I see it, and how I experience you and how I see you move in the world, whether that's in person or online. And and so and you're up to really important work in the world, and so I wanted to us to have some chance for you to share what that work is, share how you're doing it, share more about you and how you got here, and then see where this conversation takes us.
Okay, wonderful. Oh, this is great, and I'm sitting there. I'm listening to you talk, and I'm a little overwhelmed and getting a little misty because we go about making a life, right? And making a path. And you see I'm getting a little bit misty here. Mm-hmm. And we set goals for ourselves and we have ambitions. And so I think I always say, and I've been saying for the past year, that planting seeds that I'm going to sow later, and I'm doing all these things that I'll reap the benefits from later. And so I was talking with Brandis from Harlem Fashion Row, and I was saying, I'm really planting my seeds. And she's like, Cecilia, you've been planting seeds. Mm-hmm. Oh, you're in the middle of harvesting. And I'm like, what are you talking about? And so I'm like, no, because I look at people, and again, we always have a tendency to look at others. And while we shouldn't measure ourselves by others, in that way, we do, right? So we all have people who we look up to. And so with me having amazing women, you included, who I look up to and I admire, I see myself on a journey becoming, and I'm still becoming. So thank you for seeing me, one, and for acknowledging the impact and the difference that I'm trying to make in the work that I'm doing, both at L'Oreal as well as externally. So, what I do in my day job, I am in the Office of Diversity and Inclusion at L'Oreal USA. I've been with the company for 11 years. I've been in my current role for going on 4 years, I would say. I truly love the work that I do because I love that I get to be responsible for shaping programs and initiatives that really support marginalized people. And whether it's women of color, or the LGBTQI community, or veterans, I'm the person responsible for L'Oreal's engagement with our employees that fit into the groups that I mentioned, as well as the external facing world. So I get to act with the USO, or the Human Rights Campaign for gender equality for LGBTQI, or the New York Urban League. And I really found a place where my passion for these groups, and I do believe that I do have a purpose, that there is a reason why I am in this seat at this moment, has come to this juncture. And I've come to a place of, okay, I can make a difference. And, my prayer is always, Lord, how would you have me use these gifts that you've given me? And, let your voice be the loudest voice that I hear, so that I know that I'm doing the right thing. And trusting that every door that's opened is open because it's for me to go through. And if it's closed, it's because it's not my door.
It's not your door.
It's not my door.
It's not your door. Yeah, that's so powerful, because you are making a difference. Your work really matters, and it's a very difficult job. I mean, that's an understatement. Let's be real. The system, all systems, the nature of organizations is, some people will feel excluded and some people will feel included at different points. And some fall into multiple groups that experience obstacles.
Yeah.
And some
intersectionality.
That's right. And some fall into categories or groups that have privilege. And so when those are very difficult conversations to have. And then it's also about, how do we acknowledge, celebrate, appreciate the difference, as well as look at, what the challenges that those differences bring. How do you remove obstacles? There's so much in a strategy. It's loaded.
Part of who I am, right? I've learned to own the title of being a connector. For a while, I shied away from the title because I was equating being a connector with being a networker. And I had a negative connotation of being a networker, because I saw, I didn't want to be that person who was networking for the sake of networking, like just collecting people, right? But I learned that I could be very intentional with my networking. So I do consider myself now an intentional networker, but I'm also a connector, and it's just what I do. And if I'm in a space and you're there and there's someone else there, it's important for that whoever else is there to know that you're there, and to know why they should know you. And it's something that I enjoy doing. I enjoy bringing people together. And with social media, I love to see how the connections that I was responsible for bringing together have blossomed into their own relationship. And not for a pat on the back, or not to look at what I've done, but just to know that, okay, so my role was to be the catalyst for those two people to come together. And it's okay if I have no other role in that relationship
other than that.
Right. So the FOMO, right? I don't feel like I'm missing out when I see two people that I've connected go on to do something else that I'm not part of, because maybe it's not for me to be a part of that. And my role was to be the person to bring them to know each other.
Yeah, I think you bring a really good distinction between networking and being a connector, and they are different. And I think one of the things about networking, when we network, it's like really when we have our own needs at the center of that, really, I think, in networking.
Yes, exactly.
We go in to see, and even though when we're connecting with someone, we're still looking, how could I be of service to that person?
Yes.
And how can that person be of service to me in the networking engagement? Connector is different. Connector is really outside of yourself. Connector is really looking at as you said, two people or more and going, oh, you want to know each other.
Yeah.
And you literally say that sometimes. You're like, this is Shirley, this is so-and-so. You should know each other. Yeah. Over to you. I'm off now. I'm going off to connect someone else. So I see you do that, and I see you call it out as well. And it is very, very powerful. It's a gift. It's a gift. So I'm really glad that you're leaning into it, because you allow for more to emerge, right? For you to be used.
Okay,
yes.
So and I love that you said it's being in service to other, because I really started to look at my life from that perspective of, okay, so how can I be in service to, and that too could be different things in a different time or different day of the week. But as you're connecting and people, your role is to be in service to whatever should happen, right? Whatever's supposed to happen. And if you trust, and, as you get older and you have hindsight and you look back, you're like, oh, okay, that's why that was supposed to happen that way.
Right.
When it's your time, it's your time. And so something that my grandmother always said, and my grandmother, I find myself quoting her a lot this year. She would have been 100 in a couple of weeks. And I'm just, a lot of her isms are coming to me, and it makes so much sense. Like, if you think about all the things all the isms that your parents said that, you took in one ear and they went out the other ear, but then you go through life and you're like, oh, that's what she meant.
Exactly. Yes.
That's what she meant. And so my grandmother really had a thing of, what's for you will not pass you.
My mom used to say that.
What's for you. And so I found it on the Alex and Annie bracelet, and I wear it. And I wasn't, I'm an only child. And as an only child, I was always very observant of what others had, and I didn't. Well, she has this and I don't have that. And my grandma's like, well, that's not for you. And I'm like, well, I don't understand why I can't go, And then she's explaining to me, and she was very wise. And she's like, what's for you will not pass you. When it's your time, right? What God has set aside for you is yours.
Right.
And nothing that anyone can do can block that blessing from getting to you. People could try to trip you up, and perhaps it'll take you a little longer if you let the detours and the, things that take your attention away make you lose focus.
Right.
So you might get it later, but if it's for you, it will manifest itself in some way or form, and all the signs. And when you finally get to that juncture where you have the thing that's for you, because it didn't pass you, you'll realize how God had all along been trying to give it to you to get your attention. But because we're human, and because we have our own way of looking at things, we lose sight of it.
Exactly.
And we get in our own way.
Yeah, exactly. We put stuff in the way of us seeing it, but it will come back around if it's.
It will come back around, and my husband and I, we joke about that all the time, because my husband, we've been married now, it'll be 6 years. We've been reconnected for 10, but we dated in high school, right? So we dated decades ago.
That's a beautiful
and we broke up, right? And it's becoming a more common Facebook story. But what I think is different about our story is we broke up after high school. We broke up in high school. We somehow or another found a way to end our high school speaking to each other, and then we lost sight of each other for a number of years. And so when we reconnected, we started to talk about all the things we had done in the 20 plus years of being apart. After high school, we both went to the same church. But when he saw me there, he was like, I can't see her every day, so I'm not going to go to this church. I'm going to find another church, right? Mm-hmm. That's opportunity one.
Right.
Second, we both worked for the same company and didn't know it. We overlapped. Wow. Prior to me leaving that company and going on to work for Chase.
Right.
And so we talked about all these junctures, like, wow, I was there and I was there, like all these points in time. And so I said to him, you know, what if God was trying to bring us back together sooner? And because of our human frailties, we got in the way of that. But, you know, when we did reconnect, he was in Charlotte, North Carolina, and I was here in New York. And the way we were living our lives, we would never, or perhaps from the physical sense.
From the laws of probability.
Right, the laws of probability. Because unless I'm in a conference in Charlotte, right? Like, I don't see what we would have.
Nothing wrong with Charlotte, but it's not like a place that you Charlotte, would regularly go to.
I more go to Atlanta. I more go to Chicago. I just wasn't going to Charlotte, and there weren't schools that I was recruiting from. So there were no natural occurrences for us to meet until Facebook.
Right.
And then when we reconnected, we started to talk about all of the close calls. Like, I literally, walking to Chase every day, I would get off the bus on 3rd Avenue, walk through his office building, because his building connected from 3rd to Lexington. I would walk through whatever your higher power is that you believe in, and you believe in destiny. There are things that are destined for you. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And that, given the time and the opportunity, it will not pass you.
Right. Yeah, they're both, your story and the story of your friend is very powerful. Yeah, because that's crazy. There were so many moments, and then it didn't happen, then it happened. Right. And it happened at a point where you both could receive each other.
We both were mentally available. Right. We both were emotionally available, not connected, committed. Because so many times you meet people who, you know, when they finally marry that person who'd been their friend for 30 years, it's, oh, well, you know what? I was in a relationship and he was available. Then he was in a relationship and then I was available. Like, they're never available at the same time until they are, right? And for Jerome and I, when we connected, you know, we both were available. And I think, you know, God knew that I needed to see him in this way at that point in time.
And he really is, he's such a partner for you. Do you know what I mean? He's so
he puts up with a lot.
He's so for you. That's so apparent.
He is so apparent. It's so important. And I know Michelle Obama was recently interviewed, and she talked about being teammates and the importance, right, of each person in the team. And I love her. I love the quote, and I reposted it because that's how I feel about Jerome. Like, he is my biggest cheerleader. When I'm like, okay, babe, I love to knit, he's like, okay, great. If we're gonna travel, I'm gonna help you find a yarn shop. If you're going to do a podcast, you know, I'm going to help print T-shirts. I'm going to carry your bag. I'm going to, you know, so he's like, how can I help you?
Yes. And when people are looking for, like, you know, you see the hashtag relationship goals. One of the things I think is such a good guide. It really is the person that you're with for you winning, for you expanding, for you growing. You know, what does their expression of love look like? Or is it something that's about you keeping where you are, shrinking, you know? And there are people who want to, for whatever reason, this isn't a judgment. It's just like an assessment. You know, is it someone who's wants to keep you where you are? Or is it someone who really wants to empower you?
And not support growth, right?
Right.
Really early in our relationship, and I love how this conversation is going on to the relationship, the then head of diversity for L'Oreal, Edward Bullock, his wife had passed away. And they were together for a number of years. And so he was in the role for a number of years as well and with the company. So a lot of us went to the funeral. And, they were very prominent figures in their community in New Jersey, and in their church. And everyone who got up and spoke about this woman acknowledged how much he loved his wife. And that just really left a thumbprint on me. And I came home from the funeral saying, I want to know, what's our marriage ministry? Like, why did God bring us together? Like, because again, he brought us together for each other, but he brought us together for a bigger purpose, right? What's the testimony what's the lesson? What will other people get out of being around us? What will other people get out of seeing the way that we love each other, and not being so prescriptive? But I was thinking, like, okay, so what's our love message? What's our what is that ministry? And so, again, we don't think about that all the time, but every now and then when people say, oh, you guys' relationship goals, I'm like, yeah, we have our moments, right? But it is important to find that person who compliments you and challenges you, and can grow with you.
Right.
So many people, and I so respect. I have a few friends whose parents are celebrating 50 years of marriage, and I just want to bow at your feet and just sit and just learn, right? Like, because I think I said this after a month of marriage. Like, anyone who's been married for 2 months more than me, I need to understand how. If you did it more than me, longer than me, and it's important to get the lessons. And so, for me, it's like, okay, so it's important that as we go through our trials and tribulations, and we're not always at the top of the hill. Sometimes we're in the valley, but we're in the valley together. And even when we are arguing and I don't like a thing, I love him.
Yes.
The thing, whatever that thing is, so I don't like in that moment, I love him.
Right.
And so, as long as there's love, and you can see your way through the thing, because whatever the thing is, when you look back, that thing would have been so temporary.
Yeah, totally.
And so many, and I'm not saying, don't leave relationships that have ceased to serve and ceased to grow. I would never say stay in a place where you're bound or, confined if it's not healthy. But people give up so quickly because there wasn't love.
I think that it's really important, this conversation, because it's so interesting how this is emerging. So Dan and I have been together for 19 years. This year we'll be married for 18 years in November. And, it's through all those years, the love is always present. You don't always have the experience of love. Does that make sense? Like, in a moment when he's being annoying, it's just like, not feeling the love right now.
Yeah, no.
Not feeling the love right now.
Yeah, I get it.
But, I put out, one of the episodes I put out was about our relationship, our agreements that we came up with when we got together and we got married. And there were certain things that we live by in our relationship. And, one of them is that our belief that there isn't anything that can't get resolved in communication.
Yes.
So we know that even in those most challenging times when, we have to make certain decisions, when we don't see things in the same way, it's just like, we are going to figure this out. And even though it gets figured out in a series of conversations on a foundation of love, respect.
Yes, that's so important. Then
you can figure it out.
Having proximity to other marriages, right? And particularly good marriages, as well as marriages that perhaps have not stood the test of time, allow you to see, like, okay, so that's not going to work for me.
Right.
And so while you're curating and you're developing your own marriage and your own, because you're different people, you definitely can see the examples of the couples that have stood the test of time, the couples that have learned patience in a different way. Right. Like, Jerome is uber patient. I am not as patient. And so it's the yin and the yang, right?
Right.
It's the meeting each other where we are. And so we know that we're both not perfect. We say that all the time. We're imperfect, but we're two imperfect people who fit with each other.
Yes.
So we're no marriage is perfect, and no marriage is without issues, right? But having those agreements that you talked about are very important. When we started dating, because we were older, he had been married before, I'd been committed and engaged before. It was important to outline, okay, this is what I'm looking for, because I'm older now. So this is what I know. I want somebody who, I like the arts, and so I want somebody who, you don't have to like the arts right now, but you need to be open, right? I like to travel. So these are all the things that I need a Christian foundation, because I want to go to church and I want God to be at the center of our marriage. And he was like, oh yes, absolutely. Prayer. And so we held all these things that we agreed upon. And because we were older and we both have kids separately, and we weren't going to have kids together, right? So we knew that, and our joke was, it's just me and you.
I hope that you've been inspired to shift gears in your own life. You know what? I loved, you can hear that I love talking to Cecilia. Out of this particular episode, one of the things that was striking for me is the notion of marriage. What's the conversation of what's our marriage ministry? When she was inspired, when she went to that friend's funeral, or her work colleague's partner's funeral, because I wondered, we think about our own relationships and what it does for us. Obviously, that's where our focus is. But I'm curious about, what's the impact on others when they observe us in relationship with one another, and what's the impact on others when they observe myself and Dan in relationship? What's the impact on others when you see the other people in relationship? What's the impact on me? And the positive effect that it can have when I see particularly marriages that have been around for a long time, or people in relationship who've been together for so long, so successfully. And so I love that notion of what's our marriage ministry, or what's our relationship ministry, because our relationship is between us, but it also has an impact on the people around us. And I thought that was really, really powerful. So I'm interested to hear what thoughts you have about that. So, I like to hear from you. So what are you taking away, and what are you taking on as a result of this episode? So go to my Facebook page, or you can find me on Instagram as Shirley McAlpine, and get in contact with me and let me know what are you getting from it, and what do you think of this episode. She's Got Drive is produced by Cassandra Voltalina. The music is by the awesome or female band Blonde. The song is called Circles. Until next time, thank you so much for listening. Go well and stay well.